dive right in here. You have many years of experience in this.
Forget the salary. The idea is that if you don't pay the $80,000 in the first few years, you have to add additional interest to be able to borrow that money from the bank. That's why the area is bigger, because it's the internal borrowing. So it doesn't have anything to do with the salary, does it?
But the whole idea, the 4.5%, is that the orange line grows at 4.5%, such that the scheduled payment will keep in line with the growth of the payroll of the organization. So it's a level percentage of the payroll.
But the function of the salary is that it's only a reason why you might use that negative amortization. It doesn't have to do with the actual process of the internal borrowing. Isn't that right?
But the use the salary just to create the slope of the orange line. I mean, you can use 2%, you can use 10%,
right.
But the 4.5% is just I think logically it makes sense.
So what you're saying, just to go back to the reason, the context of this in this discussion, is that you're saying that it's not unreasonable for a system to do this kind of internal borrowing to smooth its payments. It's not inconsistent with generally accepted accounting practices.
Correct. Okay, Rocky, I will give you an example that everybody will understand. If you're in the real estate business, you will know that when you reduce the interest rate and you add it onto the back end, that's negative amortization. And that's being done every day in this country. Now, my real question is, we don't have a horse in this fight anyway, do we? I mean, this is going to be set by SD SIRS, and we're going to go along with it. We don't have an option of doing our own ideas. I'm sorry. Well, we get to give a vote, we get to give an input, but way back when we were going to be our own pension fund, we might have some interest in this. But at the current time, we're whatever SD SIRS going to do, right? We can tell them what we think, but
I think that's what Scott was saying.
They're going to do what they're going to do, and then we're going to go along with it, right?
Is that correct, Jeff?
Ultimately, that's correct. But again, what they have asked for all plan sponsors, if they do have any recommendations, to submit them so they can consider.
Let's send in our briefer.
The one question that I did ask her, because right now, for example, the city is on a different amortization schedule and report. Ours is somewhat more conservative. So the question I posed to them was, is it reasonable to think that SD SIRS would have one formula for the airport, another one for the city, another one for the port? And they said, that's possible. In other words, it doesn't necessarily have to be one size fits all.
Well, that answers Rocky's question. So maybe it is of interest.
Okay, Ms. Burdick has been very patient, and it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I'm not sure any of the previous speakers were finished, so I will certainly give you another shot at this. Go ahead, Lee.
I have a couple of questions, then I'd like to speak to the motion. Can you go back to page 13 of your presentation? Can you tell me which of those organizations uses negative amortization in computing their annual contributions?
I don't know. I can't tell you that.
My second question is, where in your letter does it suggest, as Mr. McEntee has suggested, that the methodology you are recommending would only apply to the 2009 fiscal year market anomalies?
Oh, in my letter? Mm-hmm. I don't remember necessarily referring to that, but the SIRS, the Chiron presentation specifically mentioned that as one of the possibilities, that it will apply only to the fiscal year 2009.
The reason I ask that question is because the motion is to forward your letter as the court's recommendation regarding input into the SD SIRS consideration, and it does not include a reference, as best I can tell, to being limited to the 2009.
To help you, I don't think that's Scott's motion.
Okay, well, clarification would be helpful, then I'd like to speak to the motion.
That's why I stopped you a second. Go ahead, Scott.
My motion, Ms. Burdick, was just to forward the letter with a cover letter that says this is the input we received from our actual.
And make no recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to speak against the motion in the sense that I don't believe the court should be taking anything that even suggests an implied endorsement of negative amortization, and I appreciate even a neutral cover letter saying this is what our actuary puts forward, I think creates an implied endorsement of negative amortization. My experience in our discussion on the capital reserves of the Port District suggests that one of the reasons that the court is financially as sound as it is because we've taken a relatively conservative approach to financial obligations over time. While I agree with Mr. Kahn regarding scenario 4, allowing a 30-year amortization period versus the much shorter period, I think the much more conservative approach, even taking that into account, would have been the green line on page 16, which allows for the longer amortization but does not suggest that the negative amortization would be acceptable to the Port District. And I would recommend that we take the more conservative middle ground by going with scenario 4 and not suggesting that we support scenario 16.
Commissioner Burdick, the scenario 4 is the green line, that is not allowing negative amortization.
That is correct, Mr. Kong, and that's the one I think I would feel comfortable recommending to SD SORS, but I would not feel comfortable recommending scenario 16 that also includes the negative amortization.
Do we all understand that? Because I think that's the bright line of this discussion is, do we simply forward it or do we forward it with comment? And I think that Ms. Burdick, not taking words out of her mouth, doesn't have a problem forwarding it, but she feels it needs to be a cover letter that says we'll oppose negative amortization, which is contrary to the motion, so we'll have to address that after the motion vote.
That would be acceptable to me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay. Dewey, go ahead.
Jeff, could you respond to that, what your position would be, whether you would support the negative amortization, the green line or the orange line?
Commissioner, I would support the more conservative approach as recommended by Commissioner Burdick. The 30-year amortization, but no negative amortization.
Okay, which I believe is a little bit different than what you said earlier. So that's what I'm just trying to get clarification on that.
But that is where I land. I didn't make that clear.
No, you didn't. Earlier, that's not what you said.
That's not what you said. So that's why I'm asking.
He was because he recommended either scenario 4 or 16. But I agree. Scenario 4, which I believe is just the 30-year amortization, that's the one that I would be most comfortable.
So you're a blue line man.
I'm a green line.
He's a green line man. Okay.
Okay. Can we clarify again one more time, then? So your position as our CFO is to go with the green line.
Yes.
Versus Kong is recommending the orange line was acceptable to him. So we have a difference of opinion between the consultant and you. Is that correct, the way I'm reading this?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Okay, it's either a yes or a no.
I'll answer, because either alternative is, but again, remember Kong's position on this is that, it's up to us to decide whether we want to make any changes. If we want to make any changes out of the 24 options that the SD SORS actuary provided, he's saying from an actuarial standpoint, and I think also from a fiduciary standpoint, you correct me if I'm wrong, that your 4 or 16 would be okay because they're not extreme. But as soon as you get into the corridor, as soon as you get into the smoothing, now you're starting to really deviate from that.
Let me summarize, Ben. I want to make sure I understand where I want to be at or where you guys are at. Kong has one recommendation. You're recommending a little bit differently than his recommendation. You're recommending to go with the green. Kong was recommending to go with the orange. Is that correct?
He was either one.
He was either one?
Yeah.
Okay. But from our CFO standpoint, you're recommending green?
Yes.
That's what I need clarification, which I think goes back to what Lee was referring to. Thank you.
But let me understand one thing, and Scott says he's okay with that. So why, Jeff, would you not just pay a little more, maybe it's because I don't understand this, and just go with the blue line? Why would you ramp it up after 13?
Well, my answer is because of the current economic conditions.
Yeah, because you have such a big difference.
It's not that much more to face the music right now. Okay. Rocky Spain is next. It's gotten too complicated for me. Yes, I agree with you. I don't think your chart is to scale. I think that may be what's causing this concern for us, trying to figure it out. But I like the green line certainly better than the orange line, but I wouldn't be adverse to the blue line. I mean, I do agree with the philosophical idea that the way everybody gets in trouble here is we start deficit spending because we're so bullish on the future, and then the future doesn't happen. And I think we ought to be really careful because we do have a nice track record, and it would be awful to Right way.
Mr. Bixler.
Frankly, Steve, initially I agreed with Lee, but as I think about the potential that Steve?
Yes, sir.
As I think about the potential that, contrary to what a lot of people, optimists in the economic and business world, would like to think, that we're going to have at least a V come down and, oh, okay, it's a new day and up we go from here. There are just as many, if not just as many people, I think, that think that the economy might in fact experience a green shoot W, that we come down, bounce pretty hard, which we've done, we come up, all the green shoots sprout, but the economy doesn't improve. In fact, the green sprouts of the economy, in fact, wither, and down we go again, and we stumble along maybe on kind of an L for a while, and then we get going. But we haven't, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, neither Mr. Kong nor Jeff kind of addressed any of those situations and which of these would be better. So what we've done over the years, long-termers up here know, is we paid our way as we went and hoped that our green shoots we were planting in the way of new industry here at the port, new return on equity projects, would in fact enable us to come up to some greater payments over time. So I'm kind of back to the blue line because I'm comfortable with it. And I think, as I said early on in my rambling, the orange line is a cheap way out of a real obligation and does not lead us to the truth. The truth is the blue line. Lee, may I ask her response to what I just said?
Mr. Bixler, I have great respect for your intuition and knowledge in the investment field, and I do not disagree with anything that you have said as far as adopting the most certain and conservative approach to the problem. The blue line is clearly intended over time, at least in my mind, to take into account long-term fluctuations in the marketplace. One reason why I'm willing to deviate on the contribution computation as recommended by Mr. McEntee and Mr. Kong in this case and go with the green line is because we are limiting it to the 1 year to accommodate the extraordinary market anomaly of 2009. If this were going to be the approach that's recommended every year going forward, I would have grave concerns about paying our way as we go and whether we would be getting ourselves in deep. So,
Thank you. All right, Mr. Peters?
Given the discussion, I think it's probably wise to make modify the motion to say that, is it scenario 4 that's the green line? Is that the one here?
Scenario 4, yes.
That the port supports scenario 4, but also to include your letter, but as part of the cover letter, say that the Port Commission supports number 4. Now, I would just say to my colleagues, remember that what the SD SERS said is a floor. And in any budget year, if we decide that paying the pension is a huge priority for us, we can pay as much as we want. So I prefer to have that flexibility because it is fashionable, and I think for reasons we can all understand, to talk about the pension as if it's the only thing that we've got on our plates. But there are a lot of things that this organization needs to support, and I think as long as we're within generally accepted actuarial principles, we can have the flexibility we should have a floor that's certainly in accord with those principles. But we're always free to pay more if we decide that's a priority. So I think that I'm willing to agree with Ms. Burdick and go forward with that in mind.
Okay, let me point out for our newer members, we have done that. A couple of years ago, we paid $1 million because we felt we had not put enough in. So we have done that in the past, Scott, where we have wanted to do that.